I am joined, as ever, by my friend, Dr. Richard Scott, GP, but not longer as a GP. But hello, Richard.
Yeah, you can say that for actually this week only. Next week I will be an ex-GP.
But you retain doctor. I know we had a bit of a chat last week, but doctor stays, doesn't it?
You can retain it, absolutely. And I'm still going to be interested in medical stuff. So that's why I'd like to carry on, if you don't mind, on your program.
Very much. Well, very much I don't mind. That's one of those English things where you think, no, hang on. Yes, that's the wrong word, isn't it? You okay with that? No. Oh, no. Yes. Right. So I know we got a question, which I sent to you, which I thought was fascinating because I've had similar wonderings about this. I'm not going to read it out because I know you have, but this is all to do with the brain. And we are often told the brain is like a muscle. And I've always thought, is it really? So I know that's part of what I guess you're going to be looking at. But yeah, if you've got questions for Richie, you can send them in, as we had the other week from someone wanting to know about the brain. Can we basically, I suppose, fix it, make it better, bigger, stronger, like we would do weight training? Is there a mental weight training that's actually going to help? I guess that's the basic question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, what I'll do, if that's okay, is I'll read out the question in a bit more detail, and then we'll have a go at it because it's got me thinking, which is always a good thing in relation to the brain, one learns things along the way. So
yeah, no, thinking is good. Thinking is a really good thing because
thinking is good.
I think I shared this with you ages ago when we were first doing this. Body Matters on the BBC was this thing that looked at all sorts of medical stuff, but it was kind of revolutionary in its day in a way. But one of the things they looked at was the capacity of the brain, and the percentages mean nothing to me anymore because it's 30 years ago, but it was something like we only really use like 5 to 10% of the brain. Therefore, there's an extra spare capacity, but you can train your brain to work more. And they showed that with a really, really long number, like 22 divided by 7 or whatever it was. How far can you remember? And the audience was asked, and they all, on average, got so far along. And then there was this other chap who would exercise his brain and went on and on and on and on with the numbers, which did go to show that you can memorize stuff if you put your mind to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly a very large proportion of the brain that we used to think had no function. We're beginning to understand that a lot of it has functions. It's just not as clear as some of the stuff that we already know about. So there's a huge amount of the brain which we don't fully understand yet. And whether it's any of that bit or the bit that what I think, which is the bit that we do understand that we can train, that's something that we're going to be looking at today. So shall I start with the question and we'll move on?
Go for it.
So the reader sent in a question saying, mankind, it's quite controversial, but stay with me. Mankind is becoming less intelligent. Our reaction times are slowing. Our memory space has shrunk. Can we exercise the brain, brackets like any other muscle? And effectively, can we grow the brain? So there we go. If you like, it's several questions in one theme. So I'm going to start with the first bit because perhaps that was the bit that I liked the best. Are we becoming less intelligent? Well, now, by the way, this is not just as an individual, but as a species. So this was a chance for me to learn. And I came across a thing called the Flynn effect, Flynn, after a guy called James Flynn, who studied children from various European countries, including the UK, France, Holland, and Norway, over 4 decades from 1932 as it happened to the 1970s. So children, Europe, 4 decades. And over those 4 decades, he found what we might well have predicted, that the average IQ, the intelligent quotient, how brainy we are, increased by 3 points per decade. So great, that suggests that everyone actually is becoming cleverer over time, not less intelligent. However, our questioner was right, because this finding has been reversed since 1975. Why? Well, research has shown that there's nothing genetic going on here. It's all environmental factors. Nutrition, becoming less good in many ways. Education, arguably becoming less good. Media, social media, perhaps taking too much of our time, not allowing us to develop in other areas. I was just reading about a school actually in the paper, just as a side effect, where they got rid of phones and introduced landlines. This isn't a boarding school, so they can ring home on a landline if they need to. Children not only playing better, they're reading an awful lot more books. They're doing better in exams. Okay, social media perhaps not helping. So what's happening recently is that they're reversing all the gains that have been made over 4 decades. In fact, probably these gains have occurred over centuries. People think it's just that the data is better over 4 decades. Here's the good news: it's not inevitable, as you might imagine. That's what we're talking about. So after the age of 18, there is something we can do about what we would call cognitive decline. Brain exercises, puzzles, teasers, learning languages, and particularly lifestyle changes improve your food, improve the amount of alcohol you drink, i.e., reduce it. Drugs, not a good idea. These environmental changes, diet and drugs and alcohol make a big difference. Smoking, obviously, is not good for us. These make a difference to our IQ, not just other aspects of life. Now, this is extra important because not only do we become a bit cleverer, and readers might think, well, I don't mind, I'm okay as I am, but our IQ is linked with how long we live. And the higher the IQ, the lower the risk of premature death. Now, of course, these things are all linked because if you stop smoking, don't take drugs, have better diet, it'll not only improve your IQ, but you'll live longer. Perhaps, but the two are linked. So it's worthwhile, if we want to live longer and maybe a bit brainier along the way, just look a little bit about our environment. It's not to do with the genes that we've been given. It's to do with how we live our lives. Here's an amazing thing. I'll ask this to you, Andy. I had no idea. Now, if 100 is the average IQ, so, a pretty brainy person, say, is 120, 130, and someone less brainy, maybe 80 or 90, what's the highest IQ ever recorded? Ever?
You see, I'm thinking like 160s, 170s.
Remember that 150, I believe, is it 150 gets you into Mensa?
Oh, okay.
I think it's 150. If I'm wrong, forgive me. It might be 160. But okay, so super brainy, 150. What's the highest IQ ever?
I don't know, 220 or something.
That's a very good guess. 276.
Wow, okay.
Jung Hoon Kim. I just thought, that's just off the scale brainy. But get this, bloke's a Christian. He says recently, because he's alive, I believe that Jesus Christ is God. He is the way, the truth, and the life. So he's using his brains to good effect. So there we go. People say, well, you can't be brainy and a Christian. And so, because I've heard many people say, oh, you've got to, basically put your brains in a dustbin. If you're going to be a Christian, you won't need them. Just blind faith. You tell that to Hung Sung Kim, brainiest bloke ever. I don't think so. That's just a by the by. So that's quite interesting that intelligence was going up. It's not going up anymore, perhaps even going down because of environmental changes, but giving us an idea that we can do something about it. What about reaction time? And what is reaction time? Well, it's the speed with which we can react to a stimulus. Now, that's pretty obvious in sport. You see people, bashing a tennis ball. If they get to the net, they've got very short time to react, haven't they? But also driving a car. Your reaction time matters. Driving a lorry, as you did. You want to have. That's why people on drugs are so dangerous if they're driving a car or a lorry, because their reaction time's slowed. Responding to a conversation, even. If people are very, very deaf and other problems as we get older, it can affect your reaction time. So is our reaction time slowing down? Yes, but that's because we're growing older. If you look at people's average reaction time, of course, as we get older, we slow down when we hit 40. We slow down particularly 60s to 70s. So many people are living 90s onwards. Of course, the overall species reaction time is falling. But why? Well, the reaction time reflects the speed of conduction along nerves. So I'm about to punch Andy in the eye, and he reacts and throws himself backwards to avoid the punch. Now, the reaction time depends on how old he is, because the older person doesn't see it in time, ends up getting punched. I'm pleased to say that Andy does see it in time and doesn't get punched. Because it's the speed of conduction along our nerves, and the nervous system, like all other areas in the body, slows down with time. But again, we can slow it down through environmental factors. Sleep deprivation. Our reaction time is very poor. Poor physical condition. Again, mental disturbances, excess food, alcohol and drugs. All of these things slow down our reaction time. What can we do about it? Again, keep ourselves as fit as possible. And here's the real encouragement. Did you know that increasing physical fitness improves brain blood flow? Not surprising, it improves blood flow around the rest of the body, including the brain. So there we go. Keeping yourself, having some degree of physical fitness should help the brain and our reaction times. You can overdo it. If you overtrain, that will cause fatigue and slow down your reaction time. So there's obviously a happy medium. Oh, by the way, caffeine improves your reaction time. We talked about caffeine previously. There we go. So you don't even have to exercise. You want to improve your reaction time, have a cup of coffee. So there we go. There's a bit of good news for us, maybe who prefer the couch to the 5K. That's the second one. Third one that your reader mentioned, memory shrinkage. Is our memory space shrinking? Yes. Now, we looked at before how aging, as we age, it causes shrinking of the brain. We lose neurons, brain cells, and the brain volume actually shrinks. If you like, cognitive decline is real. This can be made worse by any number of conditions, from dementia to depression, head injuries, other organs failing, liver, kidneys, etc., but also poor diet, lack of vitamins, excess alcohol. The brain does indeed shrink after the age of 40, more so after 60. Keep fit, keep mentally agile. So I think all of these things are linked. And in a sense, you might think, well, that's a bit depressing. As we get older, everything goes downhill. Well, it does, but it doesn't have to go downhill as fast as it might. We can do something about it. Can we exercise? Can we grow our brains? Well, the answer is yes, we can. Whether we can actually see that growth on a CT scan of the brain, I'm not 100% sure. But there's no doubt we can improve all of these things, our IQ, our reaction time, our memories, absolutely, through training your brain, a bit like the bloke you mentioned at the beginning. And we can exercise it. So even though the brain isn't a muscle, obviously, the muscles in the body are divided into the somatic muscles, the normal muscles, if you like, that move our bones, and the cardiac muscle. These are the only muscles that we have. The muscles of the eyes are somatic. But so the brain isn't a muscle, but we can, a bit like we talk about exercising faith. If we want to have more faith, Bible, pray, go to church, you'll find that your faith develops, it increases, it grows. You might not be able to show it on a CT scan, but the fact is your faith can grow. The same with brains. We can do something about it. I would suspect with time and with better imaging, we will show that we can reverse a loss of brain volume. Perhaps we can already. I'm just not 100% aware of it. So I think, thanks, hats off to your reader who asked us about these things. Yes, there are things that are going downhill, and it's because of our lifestyles and living longer. To be fair, we are living longer. You might say it's partly because of our lifestyles, but also our lifestyles can influence negatively our quality of life, both in our terms of our mental state and our physical state. So if you're concerned about your IQ, if you're concerned about reaction time, concerned about memory, I guess the answer is do something about it.
I like that. I always wondered, is the brain actually a muscle? Because it's been referred to, it's the muscle for years, but it's not.
Not a muscle. It's not even slightly a muscle. No, it's neurons and architecture allowing the neurons to work together. It's nothing like a muscle. But there we go. But it can be improved. There we go. So that's the analogy.
Yeah, I'm sort of dumbfounded with some of the fascinating stuff about the brain. But just coming back right to one of the first things you were saying, there are all these parts of the brain, and that they think that basically they're almost useless and they don't do anything. So just padding out the skull or something, and then they realize, actually, that's quite important. But that's what happens all the time, is that science is constantly realizing that we are made amazingly in God's image, and look at how cool this actually is.
No, absolutely. I mean, say, take brain surgery. Surgeons know where it's more safe to cut and where it's absolutely not safe to cut, and that influences which tumours they're able to remove. But you can take out an area that's not safe, and then perhaps discover later, the person's not quite the person they were previously. It's it's not like it's functionless. It's just that we know less about it.
Which I think is true, that all these parts of the body, oh yeah, we don't need that, that's rubbish, that doesn't do anything. Yes, that's quite important. I mean, you can imagine kind of some of the first surgeon, can't you, opening up the first body and thinking, what's that funny thing in the middle beating away? What does that do? What useless, ugly looking thing? Oh, that's the heart.
Mind you, I watched a program recently on Leonardo da Vinci and all his amazing anatomical drawings, and he knew so much, and he wasn't even a medic. He taught medics a vast amount just by looking at the anatomy and realizing, and also having a super brain. I wonder what his IQ was. Won't be much short of 200, I wouldn't imagine. He worked out an awful lot of what things did and how they functioned by how they were connected together. He was a genius, no question.
He designed the very first helicopter, but they didn't have the ability to make sufficiently powerful engines. But one of his designs basically looks like a helicopter, only didn't have a big enough engine. So, I mean, he was smart.
He was. If I had to name my top 3 people ever, he would certainly be in there.
Wouldn't he just? The brain is an amazing thing. I was fascinated by how injuries can affect it for good and for bad as well. I mean, we associate someone falls over, they bang their head on the concrete. Well, that's a bad thing because it's going to bruise the brain. It's going to hurt. It's got to be healed. But also there are some good things occasionally, very randomly, where people learn languages and all that sort of stuff, which I don't even begin to comprehend.
My closest school friend, Stuart, his brother, he said, wasn't a very nice lad, his younger brother, until he had a bad head injury. And for whatever reason, became much nicer afterwards. Hard to explain, nothing terribly obvious on the CT scan of his head, but he changed for the better. I don't know what to say.
No,
except praise God.
But then you think about things like boxing, where I remember I'd learned this years ago, that they deliberately starve them of water so the brain doesn't have the moisture, so therefore it gets drier and it increases aggression, which you want as a boxer. But I'm just thinking, but that can't be good.
No, and we know it's very dangerous. I hope one day they'll ban this sort of late starvation, late fluid restriction. People can lose 10 pounds and then go and beat 10 bells out of each other. And of course, head injuries and serious head injuries are much more common when you have dehydration, when you have less than optimal circumstances, apart from the fact you're being bashed in the head. Yeah. If you start off, predisposing to serious injury and then it occurs, it's just awful. Hopefully one day that sort of barbaric element will be abolished.
Yes, completely agree with you on that one. The brain is an amazing thing. We used to watch a program from the States. House was a thing, but one of the things I loved was every medical case, although the story was very much fabricated, every medical bit was actually a true story. They researched it. So when you see whatever it is, the story, you push that away. The actual medical stuff was from real stories. But one of them was where they actually cut out half a brain. This was a true story, but it wasn't important because the brain was damaged. So they took it out and actually the guy improved. You're thinking, who worked that one out?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I mean, that's one of those programs I meant to watch years ago. Never got round to. Maybe when I'm retired.
Maybe. There are some programs. I used to watch stuff with police and truckers because it was, as a trucker, it was like, yep, I can recognize that. And yeah, it's one of those funny things, isn't it? But then you think, that's a bit silly. That's not really how it works. Not in reality. The brain is an amazing thing. It really is. And thank you for sending that question in.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I know I've mentioned this one before, but it seems relevant just to come back to it again because IQ, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, but a high IQ doesn't necessarily equate to being sensible.
Oh gosh, no! Oh, no, I mean the complete. Well, that's where we talk about EQs. Emotional quotients.
Okay.
Do you know about? I don't know. You know. Well, IQs. I mean, I remember once, and I was lucky enough at one point to go to Cambridge University and to see various very very brainy people. But I came across some particularly brainy people who made some terrible life decisions, despite having a super brain. Their IQ would have been monstrously more than mine, but their decision making and their ability to relate to other people and having any empathy was very, very poor. So their EQ, their emotional quotient, would have been very poor. And this is a sort of this is a thing that's been recognized more and more over the years. But what you need, particularly in an organization of many people, is some people who maybe aren't the cleverest, but can get on with other people, who understand other people. And that's what this EQ is all about. I don't quite know how it's measured. I can't remember that. I'd have to look that one up. But it's very different from an IQ, because an IQ is a simple measure of intelligence, and you can test it through exams. But it has no relevance really to, number one, how successful you are in life, because many people who would do very badly in exams, the Richard Bransons of this world, can be extremely successful. Other people who do very well in exams can be very unsuccessful. But what matters more, and actually makes you much happier, is having a good relationship, the ability to relate to other people, to be empathetic. And that's where the EQ comes in. So, that's something I'd need to look to remind myself about, because probably it's more important than IQ.
I'd never heard of the EQ before. I always think EQ to me is to do with sound and bass and treble and all that sort of stuff. I'd never thought about that. But also, if you've got somebody who is especially tall, as amazing as that might be, there are going to be other negative constraints from having been so tall. I don't mean it's difficult to go through doors. I don't mean silly stuff. I mean real stuff, like they're much bigger. And is the heart actually grown big enough? Can it pump the blood all the way up? Because now it's 8-9 foot tall. So there are always going to be a happy medium. So even with the IQ, the most intelligent isn't necessarily always the most helpful, because you need to balance that with everything else, like that EQ thing, which I'd never heard of.
Right. Well, maybe one day we'll do a thing on EQ, because it's something I came across many years ago, and I need to refresh it.
I just know that over the years, I've met some people who I would say were especially intelligent, people into advanced physics or advanced mathematics, which, I mean, seriously, 2 + 2 is 4, calculator after that. What else do you need to know? But they are way beyond that. But some of the stuff they do in normal life, you think, how stupid are you? Like what? Like putting a chocolate cake that's frozen in a microwave and defrosting it by cooking it because it's quicker, and then wondering why it's now dripping out the bottom of the microwave. I'm thinking, how did you manage to make that? Because you're supposed to be like mega intelligent.
Well, mega intelligent in one area, perhaps.
Yes, I mean mathematics. Yes, they were. I didn't understand what they were talking about. It could have been really clever, but there were other decisions where you think, how? Why? We're going to get rid of the barbecue. We'll put it in the bin. Oh, it's catching fire. We'll throw water in there. Oh, it's exploding now. And like, how did you not think that through? It even says no hot ashes on the top of the bin.
Yes. You've answered your own question.
I think I probably did. The brain is fascinating. I don't understand it. Just really simply, when we're thinking about like heart surgery and brain surgery, is there a level of greater skill for the surgeon that's doing the brain surgery or the heart surgery? How does that work?
I think that's very hard to say, comparing surgeons. I mean, I think a lot of the people, the plastic surgeons who are doing immensely small stuff, microscopic stuff with huge magnifying glasses to put together tiny blood vessels in order to make a flap.
Wow.
I think the plastic surgery may be the cleverest of all, particularly sort of post reconstruction after terrible injuries or after cancer surgery. But the brain surgeons are amazing. Of course, in the future, it'll all be robotic. It'll be robots doing all this sort of thing. But of course, with hopefully a clever human holding its hand and making sure it doesn't do anything too naughty. But no, I mean, I've seen very, very capable surgeons in all the areas in which I've assisted, and in addition to doing my own stuff, I've seen the bosses are amazing in every area. So I wouldn't like to say who is better than anybody else, but I think that perhaps some of the plastics is just extraordinary.
Now that makes me want to ask another question. Is being a better surgeon more to do with patience? Because there is a level at which when I'm doing something that's intricate, I can't cope with it. I just get annoyed. It's not a vision thing. It's not an ability. Seriously, let's just buy another one of whatever it is.
I think there is patience, but also there's just having amazing hands. I think many surgeons have reasonable hands, but you'll just come across one or two. You just think they just make it look easy. What you might think is difficult, having done it yourself before, they just make it look easy. They've just got better hands.
Fair enough. I like learning about medical stuff. I don't think I'd ever be any good as. I'm glad I didn't become a paramedic, even though I passed the qualifications. I never actually got to the training, and I'm so glad. I don't think I would have been good.
Not for you. Fair enough. The other skills. None of us have all the skills.
No. I fancied riding the motorbikes and being like the emergency basic stuff, and that would have been fine. But I think most people would be glad I'm not arriving.
Very good.
Richard, thank you. Gone off on a bit of a tangent there. If you've got any questions for Richard, like we had this week about the brain, you can send them hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org, and don't forget, you can also enjoy reading Richard in the magazine, and you can get your copy at puremediathemagazine.com. Richard Scott, GP for not much longer. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
The July issue of Pure Media, the magazine, comes out on Friday the 4th of July with a plethora of amazing writers speaking about life, hope money, technology, and more. In our July edition, we take a focus on Matt McKay and his band Meet Your Maker, as well as shining a light on John Cox and so much more. The digital version is always freely available online. But did you know you can also enjoy the convenience of a printed subscription too? For all of this and more, just head over to www.puremediathemagazine.com. www.puremediathemagazine.com.